Hello friends, welcome to English Literature Club. Dear friends, as you know that we have conducted a series on English literature under different topics, and today we would be talking on the Renaissance period in English literature. Well, let's take a glance on a brief introduction. The term Renaissance means rebirth, revival, the rebirth of ancient Greek and Roman literature, the rebirth of those antiquities which took a new shape in different time. The movement had its origin in Italy and it gradually spread throughout Europe. The movement had significant influences over the English literature. After the end of the War of the Roses, which took place in 1453 and has ended in 1487, Tudor dynasty came to power in England. Henry VIII was the ruler of English from 1509 to 1547. He desired to abolish his first marriage as he had no successor from his wife. However, polygamy was prohibited under the rule of the Catholic Church. Thus, he fell into conflict with the church. He was even excommunicated by the church, but he did not pay attention to it. To fulfill his desire, he for the first time in the history of England ended the rule of the Catholic Church and established himself as both the head of the state as well as of the church. This step of his influenced every aspect of English, including life, culture, literature, thoughts, etc. From that time onward, this was the age of great literature which came out. The first great age of the English language was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth in England, named after the monarch. The Elizabethan Age produced some of the biggest marvels of English literature in history. This age is also known as Shakespearean Age because Shakespeare had a great contribution towards this period. His many extraordinary works appeared and became the most successful literary work among all poets and giant writers. The influence of Italy, France and Spain on English literature continued in this age. Drama, novels and poetry all enjoyed a golden age of literature along with fine arts, science and philosophy. However, poetry together drama emerged as the most popular form. William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, Philip Sidney, Walter Raleigh, Christopher Marlowe, etc. are some of the poetic luminaries of the age. Now, what are the main aspects or characteristics of the Renaissance period? Well, the very first movement was Humanism. The term Humanism was coined in the 19th century. It referred primarily to the new conception of man in the Renaissance. Humanism helped man to be civilized and to make him realize his potential powers and gifts. Humanism became a type of philosophy which focused on the perfection of a worldly life, but rather than on the preparation for an eternal and spiritual life. Humanism was based on the three Renaissance terms. The first was Studia Humanitatis, which meant the humanistic studies that included grammar, poetry, history and moral philosophy, based on the study of the standard ancient authors of Rome and Greece. The second was Humanitas, which meant the good qualities that made any person, man and woman, human. The third was Humanista. This term was invented during the Renaissance period. Firstly, it appeared in Italy and especially in Pisa University, spreading by the end of the 60th century. Francesco Petrarca was one of the earliest important Italian humanists. He was also the author of some significant works in Latin and Italian. reforms in the institutions. In earlier times, literature was dominated by the spirit of religion and blind faiths. However, in the Renaissance age, institutions were questioned and re-evaluated. Renaissance broadened and took the cognitive, intellectual level of the human mind to new heights. Dominance of reason. In the Renaissance age, it was the reason instead of the religion that governed human behavior. The man was free to make the use of his power. Now reason dominated all the spheres of life. That decreased the influence of religion on the people. Most of the blind faiths and practices were given up. Man-centered society. Earlier, religion was the center of interest. Hence, the main concern of literature was to deal with the religion directly or indirectly. In the Renaissance age, the focus shifted from religion to man, and man became the center of interest. Development of science. The age was accompanied by the birth of modern science, mathematics, astronomy, etc. In the fourth decade of the 60th century, Copernicus replaced Aristotle's system with the sun, instead of the earth at the center of the universe. In astronomy, Harvey discovered circulation of blood in 1628. In addition to this, there was the use of clocks, telescopes, thermometers, compasses, microphones, microscopes, etc. Hence, there was considerable development in the scientific field. This era is the era of renowned names. The literature of the English Renaissance contains some of the greatest names in all world literature. The very first one is Martin Luther. Protestantism originated with Luther's 95 Theses in Wittenberg in 1517. Later, it became the official national religion of England. Number 2 is Charles Darwin. His work on the origin of species in 1859 weakened the religious and biblical beliefs and led to the emergence of new ideas that challenged the old beliefs. The third one is Erasmus. He challenged the narrowness of the Catholic Church. He criticized the unnecessary ceremonial tradition, the sale of pardon paper, etc. He wished to return to the values of the early church. In order to do so, he produced a Greek edition of scriptures in place of existing Latin ones. The fourth one is Christopher Columbus. He traveled in search of Indies in 1492 and landed first in the Caribbean island of Hispaniola and was credited with having discovered the America. This discovery also opened the eyes of the world. The fifth one is Copernicus and Galileo. They established and postulated scientifically that Earth is not the center of the universe, as believed by the people. There were many dramatists in this period, but among them Shakespeare, Marlowe, Webster, and Johnson were the best dramatists. As well as there were poets Sidney, Spenser, John Donne, and John Milton. In this period, there were many prose writers like Bacon, Nashe, Raleigh, Brown, and Hooker. The authorized version of the Bible was published in 1611 in this period. Let's have a glance on Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation also took birth in response to Reformation soon after the fame of the latter touched skies. It began with the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563. The primary objective of this movement was to reform the Christian Catholic Church and counter the influence of Protestantism. Renaissance drama characteristics in English literature. The following giants and writers are university wits. They are Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, George Peele, Thomas Nashe, and Thomas Lodge. The generation was educated at Oxford and Cambridge universities. They used the poetry to make theatre, breathe life into dead classical models, and bring a new audience to the issues and conflicts with the stage called dramatize. During this period, Marlowe has been described as a sexual political thinker. He wrote one of the renowned work Dr. Faustus. During the age, comedy and tragedy were the two main types of drama. Both these genres were derived from Latin sources. Comedy from the works of Terence and Plautus. The very first comedy was Ralph Roister Doister by Nicholas Adal, which has appeared in 1552. The very first tragedy during this period was Gorboduc by Thomas Norton and Thomas Sackville. Gorboduc replaced the awkward distancing of characters, speaking in rhymed words with the blank verse that became a standard form of Elizabethan and Jacobean drama. Although interludes, morality plays, and mystery plays contributed to the development of Renaissance drama. What was the condition of the theatre during this period? The condition of the theatre is shown in the given picture. Fixed theatres were established in London, which was open to the sky. Daytime performances started taking place. The thrust stage was pushed out into the audience, who stood around it on three sides. The development of theatre prepared the way for the growth of an acting culture. Let's have a glance on their languages. Around 12,000 new words were introduced in the English language from more than 50 languages. Bookish and didactic words came into existence. Some writers believed that Greek and Latin words were better than English words, while some others like John Cheek felt that such words were not a natural part of English. Renaissance poetry characteristics. Sir Philip Sidney. Sir Philip Sidney is considered as the perfect gentleman of the Renaissance age. He represents the virtues of medieval age. Knight shows loyalty, lover shows passion, and scholar shows knowledge. What were his most important works? Number 1. Astrophel and Stella. It was composed in early 1580s and published in 1598. The most important work of Sidney. It is an unfulfilled love story of two lovers. It is the first famous English sonnet. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia appeared in 1590 and published in 1593. It is a romance based on the Hellenistic model of Heliodorus. Shakespeare borrowed from it for the Gloucester subplot of King Lear. Charles I quoted lines from it before his execution. Samuel Richardson named the heroine of his first novel after Sidney's Pamela. An Apology for Poetry appeared in 1583 and published in 1595. It is also known as a defense of poesy or a defense of poetry. The work was written in defense of poetry, which was subjected to severe criticism. Edmund Spenser is considered one of the preeminent poets of the English language. Spenser's many contributions to English literature. He is the originator and namesake of the Spenserian stanza and the Spenserian sonnet. What were his most important works? The Shepherd's Calendar, which was appeared in 1579. It was his first major work. It is a short pastoral poem that is in the form of a dialogue or soliloquy. The Shepherd's Calendar was admired by Sir Philip Sidney as a major contribution to the development of English literature and national culture. The second one is The Faerie Queene, which was appeared in 1590. It is the longest poem in the English language after Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It is the most important work in the history of English literature. It is an allegorical work containing praise of Queen Elizabeth. Although he intended to write 12 books, but we have only 6 books. The main themes of the poem are as follows: truth, temperance, chastity, friendship, justice, and courtesy. In his letter, a letter to the authors, he states that the entire epic poem is cloudily enwrapped in allegorical devices. The main aim of this work was to fashion a gentleman or noble person in a various and gentle discipline. Now let's have a glance on the sonnet form during this period. The sonnet form, which became the dominant form of poetry and was the preferred style of Shakespeare himself. Total number of Shakespeare sonnets were 154. Lyric, descriptive and narrative poetry also came into popular usage. William Shakespeare created a new kind of sonnet, the Shakespearean sonnet, which is also known as English sonnet. This was different than the more widespread form, the Petrarchian sonnet, brought from Italy by Thomas White, etc. Elizabethan sonnets have an iambic pentameter and consist of 14 lines with a rhyme scheme. These are called 3 quatrains and a couplet. In Petrarchian form, there are 14 lines of iambic pentameter, divided into the octet or the first 8 lines, and the sestet, the next 6. There is a turn or volta between the octet and the sestet. Here, the poet gives a different perspective or argument, and it occurs between the octet and the sestet. Sometimes, the turn is reserved for the final couplet, like William Shakespeare's Sonnet 130. Edmund Spenser, also called the father of poetic diction English, introduced the Spenserian stanza, consisting of 8 iambic pentameter lines followed by an Alexandrine iambic hexameter. What kind of style was used during this period? Blank verse was the meter of choice for adding more drama to the text. It freed the poets from the grip of making everything rhyme. It was used excitingly in drama as well as by the likes of Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, and survived far beyond the Elizabethan era with the works like John Milton's Paradise Lost and William Wordsworth's Prelude. The language was rich with grand narratives and heroic tales. The writing was rhymeful, comfort, and flowery. Clever wordplay, alliteration, and metaphors were commonly used. The age is renowned for its attractive lyrics, like Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophel and Estella, or Shakespeare's poems like Venus and Adonis. Double entendre was the most adored device of the Elizabethan poets. It comprises words or phrases with dual meanings, a generous specific meaning and an accurate secondary one, which was more sensual. The use of bombastic affectations like conceit was also popular to add more charms to the narrative.